We are delighted to welcome back Dave Eagle tonight, and Dave is going to take us through the tour of what we can expect in the night sky over the autumn. I think there's a planet lying about somewhere, Dave, isn't there?
Oh, there might be. Yeah, might be.
Right, sir, over to you.
Oh, that's quick and short and sweet. Okay, right. Okay, let's share the screen then. So, yeah, everybody okay? See the front screen there?
Perfect. Yep. Thanks, Dave.
Excellent. Oh, yeah. Oh, what's happened to that screen? Oh, don't worry about that one. As long as this one's working, that's fine. Okay, so we're going to talk about autumn observing challenges. So, yeah, so we're looking at the rest of the year, some of the highlights, and of course, throw some challenges your way to get out and have a go. And the first one of those is actually tonight, so we'll make our way through. So as we go into October, you've got the moon in its various phases, and of course, if you're doing deep sky stuff and imaging, it's really around the middle of the month that's going to be the best for getting out there and getting those subs, all those really faint stuff. Okay, so of course, I'm going to talk about the planets first. The first one's Mercury. That's at greatest eastern elongation on the 1st of October, but don't get excited because this is the view at about 6 o'clock in the evening. Here's the sun, it's not even set yet, and here's Mercury. So you can imagine that as the sun sets, that's going to get lower and lower, and it's going to disappear really quickly. So we've not really got much chance of seeing that at that elongation, because the angle of the ecliptic is quite shallow. So you know, that's the problem this time of year, and that's why the moon's so low down this time of year as well. But it is 26 degrees from the sun, so it's quite a long way. But yeah, it's not it's quite a long way, but it's not visible. And then of course it very quickly moves back towards the sun, and by the 25th it's actually at inferior conjunction. But leave it a little bit later, 10th of November, it's at greatest western elongation. Because western elongations are always visible in the morning sky, it's about 19 degrees. So it's not as far away from the sun as it is in October. But you can see it's it's much higher up above the eastern horizon or the southeastern horizon before sunrise. And of course, you've got Venus marking the way, Venus a little bit further down. So it's 19 degrees away from the sun then, but it's much easier to see as long as you've got a decent horizon in that direction. And then of course it moves quickly to superior conjunction on the 20th of December. So a good challenge might be to see how far you can follow that as it approaches conjunction. So here's an image I took in May through the telescope. And there's this bright spot I was intrigued with. So when I did a simulation of it, it's actually a bright crater called Kepler on the surface. And someone else actually pointed out that this dark sort of arc going around here corresponds with that as well. So I'm amazed that I managed to get some surface features for you guys. And you don't need to have sophisticated equipment to do that, because I was using the 120 Evo Star refractor and the ZWO ASI 120 MC camera. So they're not high-tech equipment here. And I think the next time I'm going to try this is with filters to see if I can darken the sky a little bit more and see if I can get the features out a little bit better. So have a go, see what you can do. It's all good fun. I did these during the day, but of course you've got to be really careful not to point it towards the sun. Okay, so Venus, that's the other planet, which you have to get up early to see in the morning sky. This is the view on the 10th of November. It's slowly sliding into the morning twilight, so it's getting lower and lower each morning, but it's quite nicely visible for quite a while at the moment. And it reaches inferior conjunction March next year, so it's going to take quite a while to actually reach the sun, but it's going to slip into the twilight fairly, yeah, take quite a while before it actually slips into the twilight there. And of course, soon as it gets dark, you've got the big planets visible towards the south, Jupiter and Saturn. That's the view about 8 o'clock on the 1st of October. So the bright one's Jupiter, Saturn to the left, of course. And Jupiter is in Sagittarius and Saturn's a little bit further over towards Capricornus. Very bright, you can't really miss them. Jupiter was at opposition on the 14th of July. So there's an image I took recently in 20th of September, and that was on the 8th of August when the red spot was actually visible on the disk. So look out for some red spot transits and see if you can capture when the spot's going across, because it makes much more photographic or photogenic subject when there's a red spot. And then this was taken on the 13th of September when there was actually a shadow transit of one of the satellites. So get out there, find out when they're going and see if you can capture one of those as well. And if you're really good, there is actually a transit of the satellite, and I can't remember which satellite it was at the time, but see if you can catch the satellite in transit as well. But they're much more difficult because they're not that much brighter or fainter than Jupiter itself. So they're a bit more of a challenge to spot. So see if you can get out there. But if you can get yourself out to a really dark sky, you can see them in Sagittarius. So here's the Milky Way. This is a 5-panel mosaic I did some weeks ago. And you can actually see a glitter path of Jupiter and just about the Milky Way on the sea. And it's fantastic if you can get a nice seaward view. And here's the teapot of Sagittarius. There's the spout, the steam coming out of the spout with the lid and the Jupiter. But actually tonight Saturn is actually passing just north of Pluto. Here's Pluto here. So Saturn is about here tonight. So if it's clear where you are, see if you can get out and take a long exposure, really overexpose Saturn, and see if you can pick up the really faint Pluto below it. Mid-November, Jupiter passes north of Pluto, but of course Jupiter closer to the Sun than Saturn, so it's actually catching Saturn up. So by mid-December, Jupiter and Saturn both pass north of the globular cluster M planets in the field of view with the globular cluster. And then of course later in the year, on the 21st, we've got Jupiter and Saturn. They're going to be in conjunction, but I'll talk about that a little bit more a bit later. As you can see, my water's in a glass with a very astronomical society. Reached for my glass and I tipped it all over the desk, so that wasn't a good move. Okay, 20th of July, Saturn was at opposition. So here it is to the left of Jupiter in the south, as we said. So this is an image I took in 2018, and you can see the rings really nicely on display, and they actually stick out the top of the planet quite nicely. 7th of April, a little bit of a blurry view, but you can see that the rings are now started to close up. So the disk of the planet is actually sticking above the top of the rings now compared to what they were a couple of years ago. And that's another one on the 7th of August, and this is the better one from the 20th of September. I took showing the Cassini division really nicely and some of the cloud belts as well. Much longer exposure. It is low down, so it is really difficult. You'll probably be able to see Titan. This is an image I took some years ago. I can't actually remember when I took it. But if you do a bit of a longer exposure, you might be able to pick out some of the satellites around Saturn as well. But again, it's low down, so that's going to be a bit of a chunks of all the stars down in Sagittarius area there. Of course, object of the month is going to be Mars. It's the opposition of Mars in October. So this is the path that it's followed throughout the last couple of months. And you can see this is where it was on the 1st of August. 1st of September, and then on the 10th of September it slowed down and started its retrograde motion. So it started moving in the opposite direction as the Earth overtook it. So that's where it is on the 1st of October. And on the 13th of October, this is where it's going to be at opposition. So in between here is when it's going to be at its best, because it's nearest, do I mention that yet? No, I'll mention it in a little while. It's nearest to the Earth on the 6th of October. So between now and November, beginning of November, is when the planet's going to be at its best. And then by the 1st of November, it started to slow down. It started to turn and go back to its normal forward motion again by the middle of November, and then up until the end of the year. So it does this loop. Is it? I hope everybody's been out there observing it, because it's looking absolutely stunning at the moment. Here it is. It's not in an area that most of us particularly know very well, because there aren't really any real Pisces. So here's Pisces, here's one of the fish, here's the ribbon that's holding them together, and there's the other fish up here, and then of course this is Pegasus up here, and Cetus the whale below here, and there's Mars shining away, and then you can't really miss it. It's like a beacon rising up in the eastern sky. Dark really now, so but I don't see it for a little while. I don't see it until about 8:30, 9:15, because of the houses near me. Magnitude -2.6 at its brightest in the constellation of Pisces. And here's how big it was 2 years ago when it was at opposition. Of course, when it was at opposition then, because it was a perihelic opposition, it was closer to the sun, it caused a lot of dust storms, and that looks like that isn't happening this time around, which is great for us because it's a lot higher up in the sky, whereas last time it was a lot further down near where Jupiter and Saturn are at the moment. This year, even though it's not quite as close to us, it's not really that much smaller. So it's a really good opportunity for us to get really good images, and starting to do that, which is really great. And I know a few other people out there who have been sending them into our virtual astronomy club have been getting some great images as well. And this is probably going to be the best opposition of Mars for a long time. So it's probably the best one most of us will see for the rest of our lives, I guess. So we shall see. So how have I been doing? Well, 7th of April, that was my best image of it. It was really low down, but it was really small. And you can see a bit of atmospheric dispersion occurring there as well. So this is how big it was in January. By April, when I took this image, that's the size it was and the phase. Of course, as it approaches Earth, or Earth and it approaches each other, it's getting bigger. And then by August, I was starting to get the polar cap, and I get some details on there, which is quite nice in August. And then when I compared that to a simulation, oh yes, I have got some of the features there, and I've almost got a hint of Valles Marineris on there as well. So that's quite exciting. And then September, managed to get even better on the 14th of September. And if we compare that image, here it is really blown up, so you can see all the defects in it. But you know, I'm really pleased with this because I've got a shrinking southern polar cap, and got some dark markings like Terra Serenum here, and all the other dark markings as well. And it even got the hazy polar clouds in the northern pole. And this is Valles Marineris. Here you can actually see it on there as well. This bright patch here is Olympus Mons, the huge volcano, and you can see 3 bright patches here. Now the Tharsis volcanoes. So I'm really pleased with that, even though it's, you know, there's a few pixelation in there, but really pleased with that. So I'm hoping to get a few better ones as we go forward, if my scope's still working, that is, after it fell off the mountain the other day. Okay, so moving on. So October, it's going to be a little bit bigger. So you can see, you know, it's a real good opportunity for us to get some really good images. And then November and December, it starts to shrink again. So it will start receding. So it's going to be more and more difficult to get images. And a few tips when you're actually out there taking images or observing: don't get out and look at it at the same time on successive nights, because the image isn't going to change that much, because its rotation period is very similar to the Earth's. if you go out the same night, you see almost the same part of Mars. So you need to really get out there and make the most of a long session and watch it rotate in front of your eyes so that the new features come into view. And then it's not until the 7th of October next year that it actually reaches solar conjunction. So that's why it doesn't come to opposition next year, because it takes that long to actually reach solar conjunction. So it's going to be around for a long time, but it will start getting smaller and smaller as the distance from Earth increases. Of course, the biggest challenge is not necessarily the surface features, but Phobos and Deimos, the two satellites of Mars. The names mean fear and panic, and they were discovered in 1877 by Asaph Hall, a US astronomer. So this is a view on the 6th of October, and where you can see the two moons. Now, the magnitude of these moons, they're actually not that faint. Phobos is 10.6 and Deimos about 11.9. So, you know, they're faint, but they're not that faint. The trouble is, because they're so close to Mars, then that's why we can't see them, because they're lost in the glare. That's Phobos and Deimos on around midnight on the 6th of October, when it's actually closest. So you really got no chance of seeing Deimos at that time because it's really too close to Mars. But Phobos is a bit further out, so you've got a chance you might be able to capture that. And a friend of mine, Martin Ratcliffe, who lives in America, he took an image of Mars, and you can see here he superimposed an infrared view of Mars on top of his heavily exposed image, and you can just about see the faint Phobos just showing on the edge there. So there's a good challenge for everybody, if you can overexpose Mars and see if you can capture one of the moons. I've tried a few times, I've failed so far, but I'm going to keep trying and yeah, see if we can get that. And then on the 13th, when it's at opposition, you've got Phobos close to Mars, so it's going to be lost in the glare, but Deimos is up here, and so it's a lot further out. So the day of opposition might be a good time to try and get Deimos rather than Phobos. So there's a couple of opportunities, a couple of challenges for you to have a go at that. Of course, moving out, we've got Neptune. That's at opposition, or was at opposition on the 11th of September, so not that long ago. So it's still fairly high and bright at the moment. Well, as bright as it can ever get, of course. At magnitude 7.8 or thereabouts. It's in Aquarius, and the challenge I'm going to throw out to people, this is an image I took quite a while ago. So this is the overexposed Neptune, and you can see its largest moon, Triton, visible just off the disk. These are background stars, but there you go. So have a go at that one. One, see if you can find it, and two, see if you can capture one of its moons as well. And Triton is actually around about 13.5 magnitude, so it's about the same brightness as Pluto in the night sky. So great challenge there. So as we go through October, when we get to the 3rd, Venus is actually very, very close to Regulus. So Leo will look very strange. It'll have a really bright star and a faint star really, really close together. So that's something to look out for on the morning of the 3rd at about 5:45 in the morning. So get out there and have a look at those. Here's a long-term challenge for you, because we got Cygnus really nicely on display at the moment, almost overhead as it gets dark. And we're going to point out 61 Cygni, which is the flying star. So just to orientate yourself, here's Vega in Lyra, Deneb, and Aldebaran. No, that's apologies, I've got that totally wrong. That's the double star in Cygnus, but the star we want is up here. 61.
Alberio.
Alberio, yes, that's it. Mine went completely blank then in the panic, but there you go, Alberio, not Aldebaran. And it's this bright star here, 61 Cygni. It's actually a naked eye star. It's a double star, or some people say it could be a triple star, because there is some sort of gravitational force acting on the two that tends to suggest there's another smaller body there. Whether it's another star, whether it's a large planet, they're not really sure. Of course, this is quite famous star, so magnitude 5.2 and 6.5. So the fainter star is just below naked eye visibility, but the brighter star is just above. The two stars rotate around each other in about 659 years, so that could, over a long period of time, just be able to see that in the course of a lifetime. So there's a really long-term challenge for folks. It's 11.4 light years distance, and that was measured by Bessel in 1838, and that was the first star to have its distance measured using parallax. But it's got a fast apparent motion of 5.22 seconds per year, so it moves really, really fast. And I took an image of it in 2012 and another one in 2015, and you can see quite clearly that's not going to move. Oh, it is. And you can see quite clearly, taken with two different telescopes, but with the same camera. So you can see the first one with the big diffraction spikes was a Newtonian telescope, and the second image with the much smaller images was taken with my Mac Newt. And you can see how much they moved in those 3 years. And you see this little star here is actually covered up by the brighter star. Okay, so there's a challenge for you. So get out and take pictures of 61 Cygni, and then take another one a few years later and see if you can see two stars as they move across the sky. Of course, we've got Comet Neowise coming in, another one, 2020 P1, so that's due in October. Discovered in August, and it's been in the southern hemisphere all this time, but it is heading north. So hopefully we should see it in October. It's currently around 12th magnitude, but it is brightening as it approaches perihelion, as it gets closer to the Earth. And it could reach about 6th or 7th magnitude. So it's not going to be as good as F1 was a few months ago. So just to orientate yourself, here's Virgo and Corvus, and this is Bootes, the herdsman, and this is Arcturus and Spica here. So here's the path. So it's coming up from the southern hemisphere, follows a nice long arc around here and then down again. But don't get excited, because here's where the sun's going to be. So it's going to be in the eastern sky as a morning object. So it's not going to be too far above the horizon, especially in these parts of its orbit. Okay, so as it heads north on the 10th of October, it's going to be very close to the globular cluster M68. But you see where it is in relation to the sun. I don't think we're going to be able to see that, because it's going to rise as the sun rises. So, you know, if you're going a bit further south, you might see it if the angle's a bit better. But from here, you're not going to be able to see that. On the 16th of October, it's moved up here, and it passes another Messier object, the Sombrero Galaxy, Messier 104. And so we might have a chance of being able to see that and image it as well. And then as it passes 30th of October, it's almost at its highest in the sky that it's going to get. So this really around here is the time that you want to get the comet, because it's around about the 15th or the middle of October that it's going to be at its brightest. And then of course November, it's starting to slow down as the distance between the comet and the Earth increases. You can see the distance here is really long, and then as it goes around here, they're the same intervals of time, and so you can see that these get smaller. So it's moving much slower compared to where it is here, because the distance is increasing. So it will get fainter as it recedes from the Earth. And it's also near another galaxy cluster associated with NGC 5434. So there's another challenge for you. Get out and see if you can capture that. And then 25th of December, it's right down here. The sun will be a little bit further along than this, but that's going to be starting to be a real challenge again. So too much of a challenge, probably. And it's not too far from the globular cluster M5 at that point. And just looking in detail at the top of the path, so there you go. So 24th of October is where I picked, near the top of the path. It rises at about 4:20 in the morning. But sunrise is at 6:25, so you got an hour to an hour and a half to capture the comet before the sky really starts to get too bright. So mid-October is when perihelion occurs, and it's about 0.7 astronomical units from the Earth. So 1st November and 15th of November. So this is the period of time when we're going to see it at its best for us, really. But I don't think we're going to get a show like the other Neo-Ys, but you know, let's hope it's not another 25 years before we get another great comet. Okay, so middle of October, we got the crescent moon close to Venus. That's in the eastern sky too. So it should be lovely earth shine visible there with Venus fairly close by. I've exaggerated the size of the moon in here just for effect. And then on the 15th of October, the moon's moved down and it's a really thin crescent. So the earth shine should be absolutely spectacular if you've got a good eastern horizon. And while we're talking about the moon, I'm going to talk about Mare Orientale, which is this huge bullseye shape on the surface of the moon. Of course, we don't see it very well because it's right on the limb of the moon. It's the eastern sea, Mare Orientale, but it's on the western limb of the moon because they changed it around back in the 60s. So here's one of my images of it, and you can see some of the features visible here. This is Grimaldi, big crater here, and you can just see that here. This image is actually taken off Luke Jerram's Museum of the Moon. So you can see Grimaldi here, and you can see these ramparts here are the same as the ones here. And then this little feature here is the same as this one here. So you see, we don't see it very well. But because the moon wobbles slightly, this libration brings it into view at different times. And so there are times when you can see it throughout the year. So here's another image I took, and you can see how much it's moved in compared to this one. So libration has brought that further in, so we can see a little bit more of Mare Orientale. And this is my best image of it so far, but you know, the libration wasn't quite as good as it was here when I took it, but yeah, that's seeing conditions, isn't it? So my challenge for you is to get out there and see Mare Orientale. And there are favourable librations this year still. On the 8th of October, we've got a gibbous moon. So get out there and look at the limb of the moon and see if you can see Mare Orientale, because that's when libration should have brought it in to nicely into view. There's also the 4th of November, so we've got a few options if the sky is actually cloudy. And then the 28th of December, while you're all off enjoying the Christmas celebrations, if we're allowed to have any, of course. Although it's not visible at the best time because it's still going to be in the shadow or on the night side of the moon. Once you get to full moon on the 30th and afterwards, it should still be visible, but by this time it should be sort of nodding back out of view. But you should still be able to see it fairly well at full moon and just after. Okay, so that's the 8th of October, the 4th of November, and the 28th of December is when go out and see, look for the moon, for the Mare Orientale. It's a great feature, and you know, just looking at the Rook Mountains and everything on there is absolutely stunning to look at when you get a really good view. 21st and 22nd of October, we've got the maximum of the Orionid Meteors, and they come from the area just up here, just by the club of Orion. Of course, you've got Orion's belt, you've got Rigel, the Hyades and Pleiades up here, and of course Betelgeuse as well, very red star. So just above here is where the Orionids come from. It's got a first quarter moon, but you need to be up in the early hours anyway, because that's when Orion's at its best, and that's when the radiant is going to be at its highest before dawn. It's got a zenithal hourly rate of 20 per hour, but don't get too hung up on that because it will probably be less than that. That's only a perfect score if these radiant was right overhead. So you're going to see less meteors than 20 per hour. Not going to be spectacular, but get out there and have a look. I've just fitted a wide angle camera to see if I can capture some later. So we'll see what happens. Right, 23rd of October, the moon's going to be close to Jupiter and Saturn over in the south there. And then Uranus is at opposition on the 31st of October. That's why I missed it out earlier. So there it is. Not too far from Mars, actually. And it's magnitude 5.67. So just about visible to the naked eye if you've got a really dark sky. And here's a webcam image I took of it a while ago, and that's about the best I've managed to achieve so far. But this is an overexposed image of Uranus taken with a mono camera I took a few years ago, and you can see the overexposed image of Uranus there, and you can see 3 of its moons as well. These are all background stars, but these are 3 of its moons: Titania, Umbriel and Oberon. So there's another challenge for you folks. Get out there, and on the night of opposition, this is how the moons are displayed to us, because Uranus is actually tilted at quite a high angle to the rest of the ecliptic, and so it looked like a bullseye, and the moons go around in that sort of orientation. So they're usually fairly distant from the planet. So this is Titania, this is Umbriel, Ariel, Miranda, which is going to be the most difficult one, and Oberon on the night of opposition on the 31st. And how bright are they? Well, actually, Titania is 13.87, so that's going to be a real challenge. And of course, the rest of them are fainter. Oberon, 14th magnitude, Ariel, 14.3, Umbriel, 14.95, and Miranda, 16.45. So I don't think I've got a hope in hell of getting Miranda, but I'm going to give it a go and see what we can do. So you know, get out there and see if you can grab some of those. Okay, as we're going to November, the moon again, so it's around about the middle of the month again that you're going to get all your deep sky stuff. And then the moon's going to be close to the Pleiades and Hyades on the 2nd and 3rd, but you can see it's nearly full, so yeah, it's going to block everything out. And there it is the next day. And it's very close to Praesepe, Messier 44, the Beehive cluster, on the 7th. So it's just before last quarter, so it's going to swamp them quite a bit. But this is the other challenge I'm going to throw out to you guys. So this is the southern part of M44 that I took a while ago. And I was quite surprised when I captured this, because it's a bit of a grainy image. And I couldn't get the whole cluster in, but if you look really carefully, just down here, there's a little galaxy. And when you look really closely at this image, it's actually peppered with lots of little galaxies. So there you go. There's my other challenge. Can you image the faint galaxies that lie well behind the cluster? Of course, the cluster's within our Milky Way, and they are galaxies in themselves, way, way off in the distance. So see if you can capture those behind Praesepe, as I was surprised to see them there, I must admit. But don't try it that night with the moon that close, because that's going to really you know, pick a nice dark night around the middle of the month when the moon's out of the way when you do that. Okay, 10th of November, Mercury reaches western elongation, so this is the best you're going to see it then. So there's Venus still progressing slowly towards the sun, and there's Mercury down there. So it's 19 degrees from the sun, as I said before. And then the moon starts to join in the fun on the 12th of November. So there's Moon, Venus and Mercury making a nice line. But watch it over the next few mornings, if we get clear skies, of course. Because the next morning, on the 13th, it's a very thin crescent moon. Earthshine should be wonderful, and you should have Mercury and Venus overside of it as well. But on the next morning, go out a little bit later. This is about 6:30 in the morning. Venus, Mercury, and here's the moon. It should be really, really thin. So that's challenge. What number is that now? But there's another challenge for you to get a really, really thin crescent moon in twilight on the morning of the 14th of November. Talking of the 14th of November, from the 14th to the 22nd of November is National Astronomy Week, and it's all about the planet Mars. So if you want to know more, astronomyweek.org.uk, where there's lots of events going to be happening. Hopefully going to be some streaming, some live images of Mars for that. It's not coincided with Mars being at opposition because they wanted it to be early evening when Mars was up fairly early. So they've left it a month so that we can broadcast things in a reasonable time of the evening to get people involved and get people enthusiastic about Mars early evening. Right, 17th and 18th of November, that's the maximum of the Leonid meteor shower. And of course, that lies right within the radiant. So all the meteors appear to come from that point right within the sickle of Leo. It's associated with Comet Tempel-Tuttle, and it's about 15 per hour, so it's not that fantastic really, but there is a 33-year cycle, and if you're around in 1966 and 1933, there were absolutely enormous meteor storms. It was extremely active in 1999. It'd be interesting to hear how many people saw that in 1999. I did, luckily, because I got up the morning before. It was expected to arrive, and it was a really, really great morning until the fog rolled in. And there should be another storm in 2032, so put it in your diary, and let's see if we can see the other storm. 22nd November, the Lunar X and V are visible. And this is a clear obscure effect, which you may have heard of. The ideal time is about 2:30 in the afternoon, and I've got that time from Mary McIntyre's astronomy blog. So here's the Lunar X. You can see it here. This is just before the end of it. Now, the reason I'm posing this as a challenge isn't because the Lunar X is visible that day. It's because it's best visible during the day. So you can see it's 2:30 in the afternoon. Now that's formed from the sunlight as it rises, hitting the flanks of the craters. I never get these right. Blancanus, Lacaille, and Purbach. And you can see it forms this lovely cross. And it really, really looks very distinct when you see it. But you only see it for a few hours. It's not there for long, because as the sun rises, and the more of the terminators lit up and the terminators moving across, you quickly lose it. So it'll be quite a challenge in the afternoon to try and find that while it's still daylight, and then see how much is left, because by the time it gets dark, it should have gone. So get out there in the afternoon, being careful you don't point your telescope towards the sun, of course, but get out there and have a look and see if you can see the Lunar X. That's the only time we're going to be able to see it the rest of this year properly, because the other times it's at its best, it's actually below the horizon. So these are the three craters: Purbach, Lacaille, and Blancanus. And the Lunar V is feature in the southern part of Mare Vaporum, a bit further north, close to Rima Hyginus. So here's the Lunar V. You can see it here in one of my images, and there's Rima Hyginus and a few of the craters just named, but you can see that really, really nicely at around the same time as the Lunar X is visible as well. Moving on, 29th of November, so we're getting towards the end of November now. The moon is between the Pleiades and the Hyades, but again, it's a full moon, so we're not going to see that very well. And then moving into December, you can see that we're still favouring the middle of the month for deep sky imaging, but you can see it's slightly earlier, so it's getting towards the more towards the beginning of the month rather than right in the middle. So the phase is changing as we go through those months. And on the 1st of December, Jupiter and Saturn now looking very cozy. Here they are. So they're getting closer and closer together. Complete lack of social distancing there, but let's hope they got masks on, but we shall see a bit later. So 5th of December, the moon's close to Praesepe again. So it's a gibbous moon just above Praesepe. And of course, it's going to be so bright, it's going to swamp the cluster out completely. But it could be a nice challenge to overexpose the moon and see if you can get the cluster nearby. And then the 13th and 14th of December, we got the Geminid meteor shower. Of course, here's Gemini, the twins, holding hands, as you can see here. And here's where the Geminids appear to come from. And they reckon the zenithal hourly rate for this one is about 100 per hour. So it's, you know, quite significant. So you might be able to see one a minute maybe, if you're lucky. And the new moon's actually on the 14th, so the moon's well out of the way. So really dark skies to be able to observe the faintest of the meteors. And then, of course, just before Christmas, we've got Jupiter and Saturn in conjunction. It looks like a single star down here, but that's actually Jupiter and Saturn really nestled close together as Jupiter passes Saturn, because it's moving a bit faster along the ecliptic than Saturn is. Which is good news, because it means over the next few years, Jupiter is going to start getting higher up in the sky, and Saturn is going to get higher in the sky, although that's going to take a bit longer because it's moving a lot slower. So there they are, really, really close together over there. And if we zoom into that, so this would be the view you'll get. So here's Jupiter, here's Saturn. And of course, the big challenge is going to be, as you can see, it's about 5 o'clock in the evening, so it's going to be in deep twilight. So you're going to have to be quick to get out there and capture them before they get too low, because when it gets really dark, they'll have set. So the last challenge I'm going to set you properly. Oh no, it's not. I've got another one to follow actually. They're visible in a fairly wide field of view, although in this case it isn't that too wide a field of view. But see if you can capture the satellites. Of course, you've got the Galileans, which are going to be there, and some background stars. Also Titan as well. See if you can capture those in the twilight, but that's going to be a step too far, I think, to find those in the twilight. Moon is close to Pleiades and Hyades again on the 26th and 27th of December. And then the last challenge we're going to set you is the Orion Nebula. Or could be the ultimate challenge, who's going to be the first to spot Betelgeuse when it goes supernova? Oh, okay, maybe not. Okay, so the Orion Nebula, Messier 42, of course, we've seen the wonderful images, and the challenge I'm going to say isn't to locate the nebula itself, because I think, hopefully most of us can do that, but look at the trapezium. This is the 4 stars right in the center of the nebula, and they are the stars that give the light and the color to the nebula and making it glow the color it does. So here's a close-up view taken from Sky and Telescope, and you can see the 4 stars of the trapezium, but there are more stars in there than you can usually see. So you've got the 4 stars here, A, B, C, and D. Why are they named C when it's obviously the brightest star? I don't know, but somebody named them. And the star itself is Theta Orionis. It's a multiple star, as you can see. So C is actually just 5th magnitude. D is 6.7. A varies between 6.72 and 6.65 because there's lots and lots of variable stars within the Orion Nebula. So there's possibly another challenge for folks if you can take different pictures of the Orion Nebula and see if you can see those stars varying in brightness. That could be quite a good one. And then B varies from 7.9 to 8.65. So we can see those 4 quite easily, but the other 2 that I have seen are these 2 here. Now they say you can see that with a 6-inch. I've definitely seen it with a 10-inch telescope under really good conditions. And they are both magnitude 11. So they're not actually that faint. The trouble is because they're surrounded or in front of this cloud of gas and dust, you don't get the contrast that enables you to see them against the dark background sky. And that's a bit like the Ring Nebula, not being able to see the star in the Ring Nebula or the Dumbbell Nebula, because you don't get the contrast between the dark sky to actually pick these stars out. So they can be quite a challenge. You have to have really good seeing conditions to pick them up. But they're 11th magnitude. So a 6 to 10 inch will definitely reveal those. But all the other ones are really, really faint. Okay, I've set you a few challenges there. My Sky Diary is available online. So go to my website, star-gazing.co.uk/diary. It looks like this, and it's a team up calendar. So what you can do, you can actually install the app on your phone. You can carry it around with you once you set it up, following the instructions on my website. And then while I'm here, let's have a cheeky plug for my astrophotography guides. One on Deep Sky Stacker, one on Photoshop, and one on Imaging the Moon. And then the latest one, for those who don't want to pay the subscription charge for Photoshop, Affinity Photo is becoming all the rage now, and it's a really powerful tool to use as well. And some of you know that I do astrophotography and astronomy workshops, but not at the moment. They all have to be virtual. So I've organised one on the 7th of November for Affinity Photo, and that's available on my website as well. But anybody can email me if they want any details. And then, as you've asked me to come in today, I'm going to offer an SGL discount until the 4th of October. So if you go onto my website and any order, you can get £1.50 off any order off my website. So, yeah, so that's me. So the last thing I've got to say, similar to what you do for the stargazing, I run the Virtual Astronomy Club on a Tuesday evening. It's actually switching to the 1st and the 3rd Tuesday of the month from October. So you're all quite welcome to come in and join in the fun. I saw a few names in the list already come along. And that's all the details are star-gazing.co.uk/VAC. So I'll leave it there. So if anybody's got any questions.
Super. Thank you very much, Dave. That was awesome. Lots of challenges.
That's the idea.
So obviously the recording is going to be up on our YouTube channel as per normal. So if you didn't get note of all those challenges and the dates, you'll be able to get them from there. And I highly recommend. I'm on the wrong screen now, but I highly recommend the Dave's guys. I've got the Affinity one and the Moon processing one myself. Absolutely worth it, especially with a super discount. Okay, thanks very much. We've had one question coming already, Dave. What was the focal length used for your images of the Lunar X and Lunar V? Do you remember?
Using my C11. that was using C11. So what's that? 2 and a bit meter focal length.
Great.
It was till you dropped it, Dave.
You dropped it. Well, I didn't drop it. I'll let you know when I've tested it out properly, if it's still working or not. But it looks okay at the moment. Yeah.
Is that both bits of the mirror? Are they
Yeah. Duct tape works wonders.
Yes, and if you haven't fixed it with duct tape, you're not using enough duct tape.
That's what they say. That's what they say. Excellent. I don't think there's any other questions coming in. So, Dave, that's really informative as usual. Lots of opportunities for clouds to come and play, wreak havoc on our new observing season. So I haven't got anything else. Nothing else to comment on. So
we've got to talk. I was just going to say I'll put the video up for this talk in the next day or so, and we've got a member talk next Sunday, which is from Richard, who's called Old_Eyes on the forum. And he's a chemist, and he's going to come and talk to us about the periodic table and where the elements come from, and the history of the elements, and then the development of them from nuclear synthesis, supernova, kilonova, and other cosmic processes. So I think that's going to be a really interesting talk. I'm looking forward to that one.
Absolutely, yes, that will
be a bit different.
Yeah, yes indeed, yes indeed. Okay, well in that case, we look forward to seeing all your images of Dave's challenges coming up over the next few months. I've bought myself, Dave, one of the little 6-inch GSOs, so I'm determined to get out there and get some sort of image of Mars this time round, if nothing else. So we'll see how that goes.
And we'll have you back in about 3 months' time, if that's all right, Dave, for spring.
Okay, yeah.
Excellent. Happy with that?
Fantastic. Yeah, just checking. So no other questions have come in. So in which case then, we look forward to seeing you all next week. Dave, thanks very much indeed again. Great to see you, mate. And we'll see you all very soon.
Night all. Thanks, Dave. Cheerio.
Okay, thanks. And don't forget the Virtual Astronomy Club on Tuesday.
Will do. Cheers, Dave. Bye.